And the Wall Street Journal reported that Team USA is so loaded that Steve Kerr could bench his starters, play only his backups, and still have the best roster of anyone on the planet. And of course, this compares to the famous Dream Team that we talked about. What do you think? I'm not sure how closely you read the article in the Journal. So what do you think the entire Dream Team was paid back in 1992? This is like incredible lineup.
50 mil.
Pretty close, 35 mil.
Okay.
What do you think the current team is
paid?
Well,
10 times.
500 mil.
Yeah.
So it was actually more than 10 times. It was 10 times your estimation.
Yeah.
17 times. That is some pretty incredible inflation there. And what a team. You've got LeBron and you've got Kevin Durant and you've got Steph Curry. You've got some pretty good players, but it doesn't run as deep as that 92 Dream Team. So what does that say about our sports? Has the pendulum shifted too far? Because ultimately sports people are paid by you and I, our customers. So the money has to come from somewhere. It isn't make-believe pot of money that just comes out of nowhere. The money comes from regular punters playing for tickets, essentially.
Not really. That's not where the money comes from. So
broadcast.
I think I've mentioned this to you. Like Mark Cuban said to me probably back in 2016 or 17 that he thinks the NBA is going to be the fastest growing, like in terms of value, global sport. Yeah. And so I think whilst this is true across all like big leagues in the world, it is most true in the NBA. Like the NBA has been this huge grower. The money from this basically comes from TV rights. I mean, that is where the...
But TV rights money comes from customers as well.
That's right. And so if you look at something like, I'll give you an example of the NFL, but other leagues will work similarly. Australian leagues are completely different. Australia is kind of still this happily little quaint place where the teams are not privately owned in the AFL, which is like the only sport that has any status globally, right? Like the NBL's done a great job in being a feeder for the NBA, but globally the AFL is the only sport on big leagues' radars, and that's still owned by like they're not privately owned. The teams are just community teams.
Most other sports in Australia, they are relatively private, aren't they?
Yeah, a lot of other sports are private. Soccer is private.
Rugby union obviously is. Rugby league is semi-private.
Right. Yeah, semi-private, exactly. But there's still a lot of
Broncos are publicly listed at one point.
But there's a lot of community owned teams, and the whole AFL is like that. Remember the Sydney Swans were briefly owned by Jeffrey Edelston, and it didn't work out.
And I think the Gold Coast, the Brisbane Bears were owned by Skase, I think owned a bit of it, and Ruben Pearlstein owned a bunch of restaurants. Ruben Pearlman, I think his name was, owned it. And that was a torrid period of time.
And so the way it works in the NFL, broadly speaking, is that the team owners get to keep all of the money from tickets and from merchandise sales. Yeah. And that effectively pays the salaries and maybe pays some of the operating costs. And then all of the profitability largely comes from their share of the media deals. And what we've seen is that live sport has become essential in terms of its media positioning, because linear TV, which are old free-to-air, they don't have much going for them anymore. But what they've got is if they buy free-to-air rights on live sports, then people will go and they'll watch linear TV, because really the only thing people want to watch live nowadays is sport. Everything else is streamed or whatever it is. You're right. Some news, but people are getting their news from other sources. And so that's why sport has become so essential. And then it becomes essential for people like Amazon who say, well, we can build our Prime business massively if we go and buy like Sunday night American football. Yeah,
or in Australia, Stan Sport.
That's right. And so obviously Nine paid $300+ million for the Olympics in Australia. That's all part of the same thing. It's unfortunate strike timing for Nine, just when the Olympics is happening. But
the newspapers are striking, not that.
But basically, this is live sport. I think is only going to get bigger and bigger in terms of the broadcast rights that are being paid.
The counter position there. I think there's these periods of time where nothing changes and everything changes. So I'm not saying we're at this period, but you look at the classic example was the car replacing the horse and car. So everybody thought, well, we built the faster horse. Well, no, we built the car. And then in TV actually came by like the streaming is what. So TV didn't really change. You had cable, which was a minor sort of change, but essentially it was sort of delivered roughly the same way. Cable not satellite, but roughly the same way, or coaxial. Whereas streaming was quite different. There is at some point it's like when you block a pipe and eventually you just can't you can't stop it. You can put your finger in the dike for so long, eventually the power just overcomes you. I think eventually sports rights have gotten so expensive that it eventually becomes unsustainable, because eventually it has to be paid by someone. The consumer ultimately in the day has to pay. And we've had this 20-year period between ZERP and just unrelenting debt-funded spending that I think has in many ways contributed to this escalation in sports rights. So really Murdoch started in the early 90s or mid 90s. I'm not sure how long it's got to play.
Well, the thing is that if you have to, this is kind of my point about many things now, like if you have to make money on the stuff that you buy, then that means there's a limit to how much you can pay.
Yep.
But if you get to make money in lots of different ways on the stuff that you buy, then it completely changes the economics.
Yep.
And so Amazon, for example, they don't need to make money on Prime Video. They just need people to buy stuff off their retail business that sign up to Prime, and they try everything to keep people signed up to Prime. And so they go and pay for these rights, but they're not really trying to monetize the rights in subscriptions to Prime.
Amazon's a pretty unusual. And Amazon also hides on the cover of AWS.
I know.
So they can do what they want because of that. Not even because of the Prime thing, because of the AWS thing.
Yeah, and so now let's talk about like Netflix. So Netflix spends many billions of dollars a year on their own content.
But Netflix doesn't buy much sport.
Well, but
almost no sport.
Yeah, but the thing is, they could.
They don't.
So they don't today. But like, you know, Netflix is still going through this period of like optimizing what their content is, and like they've now.
I think Netflix and
they'll be bidding for sport rights at some point.
I think Netflix have realised we can actually get a better return on producing our own content than buying sport. And it seems to be a great, and obviously Netflix isn't a live platform, and there's a big shift for Netflix to go live.
That's good arguments.
I think there's two reasons why Netflix happened. I'm not sure. Yeah, you're probably right. Netflix probably eventually does probably start doing because they've got such great scale. It's about the scale benefits. They've got such great scale, but I'm not sure it's a priority for them in any way, and it will be. I don't think it will be a priority.
And then you talked about big tech and the dominance of big tech. Anyone on big tech that wants more people on their platform.
Well, like YouTube's a classic example.
The quickest and easiest way of doing that is to go and buy live sports.
Yeah.
And so I don't look. It's not.
But we're not in ZERP anymore. We're in a period where investors want returns. I'm not sure. You can't just keep bidding up the price of an asset.
Well, it depends. No, I agree, but it depends how much this expense represents of your business. And so let's say you were talking about Meta a second ago. Now, I don't know if Meta's going to start bidding for live sport rights or not. It depends what their bigger plans are, right? But like they could go and bid for these rights and it would just get lost in their profit and loss. And they would.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can bank on that theory though, that big companies are stupid and they'll
No, but they're not stupid.
Money.
Like this is about the surest way to get a committed audience is to own the TV rights for major live sporting events. That guarantees you an audience. Not much other than that guarantees you an audience. Every
audience has a price though, and you can't just keep bidding things up to an insane level with no sane relationship with the money you can earn.
Well, I think that if you looked at this 10 years ago, you would say we've already passed insanity. But the thing is that they're making money on these prices still today because
the famous comment is things can stay irrational longer than you stay solvent.
Yeah, but I don't even think they are irrational now. Like if you look at the way people are making money, what's happened is people have figured out way more different ways to make money off live sports.
And gambling has been the big way.
Well, I agree with you.
Eventually, I'm not sure how sustainable gambling is another way of stealing from your customers. It's a more indirect way of stealing from your customers.
Well, gambling is only getting going in the US. Sports betting. It's
yeah.
only getting going.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think there's a lot of that. I mean, you can have whatever views you want about sports betting, but we can say that in 10 years' time, the amount of sports betting that exists in the US will be a substantial multiple of today's revenue and profitability.
I think that's a lot of them baked into valuations already because people know it's coming. This is not news to anyone. You ever watch Happy Days?
Yeah.
There's one of the great sayings that derive from Happy Days called Jumping the Shark. Have you heard of Jumping the Shark? And Jumping the Shark was the episode where Happy Days was this great show and it started not being that good. And it was not when Fonzie did this thing where he jumped over a shark and they went to like LA or something. Yep. And it was that phrase has ever been known as jumping the shark. And eventually something's going really, really well. And it's used mostly in TV shows. Every TV show eventually jumps, except for maybe The Simpsons, which somehow has not really jumped it. But every other show has jumped the shark at some point. And I think at some point, the same thing happens with sport. I'm not sure if we're quite there. Your view is you can get another 10 years out of it. I think we're pretty much there.
It'll be interesting to see.